When I began breastfeeding, I was blindsided by how difficult it was. I may have thought I was prepared, but having known only a handful of people who had ever breastfed and only seeing it up close from a couple of them, I had a huge learning curve. Since then, I've become a doula, a lactation consultant, and a childbirth educator. I'm your host, Lo Nigrosh, and I welcome you to the Milk Making Minutes, where we explore breastfeeding experiences through the lens of systemic barriers, so that you know your breastfeeding struggles are not your fault, and your triumphs really are the miracles you feel they are. This week on the Milk Making Minutes, you will hear a story of how having a difficult birth and a difficult start to breastfeeding intersected with negative feelings about my guest's own body. Kasey Potts opens up about her experience with immediate feelings of anxiety when trying to breastfeed, switching to exclusive pumping, and feeling disconnected from her body while making milk for her daughter. As you listen, think about your own feelings about your body during pregnancy and the postpartum period. Were you amazed at all that it was doing to produce life and take care of another human being? Or were you mourning the body you once had? How did that impact your ability to bond with your baby? Listen to this story of Kasey figuring out the way to feed her baby that brought the least amount of anxiety and the most amount of peace so she could focus on bonding with her baby. Hi, Kasey. Welcome to the Milk Making Minutes. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So before we get started, I would love for you to introduce yourself and your family.
Sure. So my name is Kasey Potts, and I live in Southern California in Westlake Village. I'm originally from Massachusetts, so I have kind of a dual coast perspective.
Oh.
And I have a 5-year-old daughter. Her name is Kennedy. And I am married to my high school sweetheart, if you can believe it. We started dating senior year of high school and never broke up. Never found a reason to break up. I mean, I wanted to kill him many times, but never actually broke up. So we've made it work.
That's awesome. I know, isn't it?
So cute.
Yeah. So good. Okay. And you yourself have a podcast. Do you want to tell us what it's about?
Sure. My show is called Kasey's Corner, and it's actually a little bit of a reboot because when I was a kid, I hosted a talk show on Radio Disney from age 10 to 16. And basically at 16, I was too old to be on Radio Disney. So it was a celebrity talk show. Different guests would come on. I would interview them about whatever platform maybe they were supporting or a charity that they were a part of. So for a 10-year-old or a preteen, it was an amazing opportunity and definitely kind of set the tone for what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I went to school for broadcast journalism. I did the marketing thing for quite a few years. And then after COVID hit and I was no longer a brand manager for a celebrity chef because the whole department kind of dissipated. It was one of those, okay, I have no more excuses not to pursue my dream of hosting that talk show again. So I rebooted Kasey's Corner because it's me. It's whatever the world kind of how I'm seeing the world. And my tagline really is a resource for millennial moms to overcome the overwhelm of everyday life with confidence, humor, and style. And that really encompasses everything where I am really trying to promote body positivity, even just body neutrality and having that confidence of yourself, feeling like you're enough. Because I think as moms, we tend to feel that depletion very often. And a little bit of humor, a little nostalgia, and, got to throw some fashion in there too, because I think moms tend to lose themselves and get stuck in the yoga pant rotation.
Yeah,
so I try to bring I try to bring a little bit of everything, but really targeting the millennial mom.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much. I'll definitely link your show in the show notes.
Awesome.
And I know body positivity and breastfeeding, or just being okay in your body and breastfeeding, go together. And I know you mentioned to me when we talked about you coming onto my show that had a lot to do with your breastfeeding experience. So we'll definitely get into that. But before we do, let's go back to before you were having a child, before you were pregnant. What was your exposure to breastfeeding before you had a baby?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an only child, so I didn't
Mhm.
have older siblings to kind of look at and see their baby experiences. I have older cousins, but living out in California, I'm the only one. Like I said, I'm from Massachusetts. My family's all back east still. So I'm really the only one out here. I was the first of my friends to have a baby. So it was very much just kind of either in passing as someone maybe nursing on a park bench somewhere or in an airport, or just what I honestly saw on social media and television. So for me, I had this expectation that it was going to be just kind of normal and natural and the thing to do. So I didn't anticipate any sort of variation or that there was really any other way or any other method for how I would eventually feed my child.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I hear both. As a lactation consultant, I hear both. I expected it to be really, really hard.
Mhm.
And it can go either way for those people. It was really hard, or, oh, it was easier than I thought. And then I hear, I expected it to just be natural because it's breastfeeding. And that's what,
Right.
we've been doing since the dawn of human history. And
Exactly.
so it's interesting to hear how people come to it. Okay. So you kind of had seen it around. So when you got pregnant,
Mhm.
were you having discussions with your care providers about baby feeding choices?
I think it was very just matter of fact when I started talking to my doctors about it. They asked if I planned on it. I said, yes, I plan on nursing. But I was also open to however my child needs to be fed and nurtured and nourished. I'm open to that as well. But it was always my intention to actually breastfeed, of course.
Okay. Yeah. Did they guide you towards any support resources while you were pregnant to kind of help you prepare for what that might be like?
I wouldn't say my medical care team necessarily did. I think that I did go to a breastfeeding class, and it's so funny because it's in my brain because of course, I brought my husband with me, and it just so happened to be like the final game of the World Series when the Mets won again for the first time in forever. And he was totally streaming on his phone the game, and all the other husbands were like peering over to try and see
That's a
the
funny story.
score. Yeah, so I remember going, and it wasn't until I think that course where I started to get that hesitation and started to get those doubts of or the realization of, oh, this is going to be harder than I thought. This isn't always just going to be, here's my boob, here you go, kind of thing.
Mm.
So I think it was at that moment and during that class where I started to feel that hesitation or just get a little bit more nervous about it.
What did you hear in that course that made you feel more hesitant?
I think it was the introduction of like all the extra tools and the nipple shield and the nipple cream and this and that and this contraption that this boppy or that one, whatever it was like all these extra things that in my head, again, my assumption, supernatural. We've been doing it since the cavemen. It's the most natural thing that a woman's body is supposed to do when bearing children. So the fact that there was now this whole marketplace of things to help with this, I was like, oh, wait, so clearly there's a need. This might not be the cakewalk I thought it was going to be.
Wow, that's so fascinating. So just hearing that there was this whole marketplace of
Yeah.
items
Yeah,
geared towards breastfeeding started to plant the seed of doubt.
totally.
Yeah, and I think that should be something that lactation professionals who are listening should really take heed of,
Yeah.
because sometimes, you know, you're trying to be helpful by saying you could use this and you could use that and you could use this, but there is such a thing of as being told about too many tools.
Yeah, there is such thing as too much information.
Right. Yeah. 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 And, I always tell people when they ask me advice about what to put on the baby registry, I'm like,
Yeah.
just wait. Babies need very little.
I
In the
say the same thing. I always say, like, ask for the gift card, ask for an IOU kind of gift because you don't know what your baby's going to need or what your baby's going to like. I mean, we had so many returns to Babies R Us, which Babies R Us RIP. But I think I think that there's such, again, this marketplace and this consumerism around the baby registry, which It sucks because you really could save a lot of money or at least be able to allocate that money differently than ending up with a stack of bottles that your child doesn't even want to touch, you know? So,
Right. Yeah. That's so true.
yeah.
And to think that knowing about all of those tools could add to a person's breastfeeding anxiety before they get started is really something to be aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you attend the breastfeeding class. Did you do anything else to prepare? Did you read any books or?
I honestly I don't think so. I think that it was kind of one of the furthest things from my mind because
Mhm.
I didn't think that it was going to be a thing. I think really in my head, I think I was looking more at the like the baby proofing things and the like how do I keep my child alive and how do I not like drop this baby down the
Right.
stairs or something like that, right? I think that there were just so many other anxieties in my head around having a newborn that I 100% anticipated the nursing thing was going to just be very easy.
When asked if there was anything about the birth that impacted breastfeeding, Kasey went on to tell me about being induced with a Foley bulb and Pitocin at 41 weeks, with an eventual C-section, after dilating to 6 centimeters and some baby heart rate crashes during contractions. She said that although she wasn't aware of this at the time, she feels she was scared of a vaginal birth and felt that a C-section was giving in to the, quote, easy way out. She agreed to the C-section because she was ready to get her baby out and not put any more stress on her heart. What happened next is more common than we think, but many new moms are afraid to talk about it, so I was glad that Kasey did. It's okay for moms to feel however they do upon meeting their new babies. There is no one right way to meet your baby. As you listen, think about your first moments with your baby. Was there anything that happened during the birth that impacted those moments?
I just remember, of course, this is, C-section, so a little foggy of the memory, but I do remember them putting her on me, doing the skin to skin in the recovery room, and right away them putting my breast up to her. And for some reason, there was just something that felt so disconnected in my brain of like
Mm,
seeing my breast near my baby. It was like a very outer body experience where I was like, I almost felt like my breast wasn't attached to me. Does that make sense? Like
yeah.
it felt like an object and it didn't feel like my body, which to me, this is the moment where she's supposed to be connecting with me and bonding onto me. And I had this weird feeling of it's fun. I don't think I've ever actually talked about this before. But this weird feeling of this is just an object. It's actually not part of me, which was weird.
Mm,
And you know what? Maybe in now looking at it in hindsight, maybe that was because I had this messaging in my head that there were all these objects and knickknacks and gadgets and stuff to help with it, help with breastfeeding, that it was like really just a vehicle and a vessel and it didn't have that sentiment that a lot of people talk about around breastfeeding.
yeah. Yeah.
So right away there was this strange disconnect and she didn't latch right away. So, the nurses are it's okay. She's fresh out. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So then we tried again and again and again and she wouldn't latch. Then we discovered that she was tongue-tied. So they did the what's the terminology for that? I can't think of it now.
Frenectomy.
Yes.
Mhm.
So yeah, they snipped her little frenulum there and it helped a little bit. But at this point, there was now I got anxious every time that we would try to do nursing and that she would try to latch and everything. So the nurses got a little concerned and instantly brought in a pump, right? Like brought in the hospital grade pump. And I just continuously felt so insecure about my body and just being exposed and now having this mechanism attached to me and feeling like literally we were joking about it, but like you feel like you're on a cattle ranch and you're just getting milked, right? And that sound, I don't know if any of your guests have talked about that sound that the pump makes, right? You start hearing, I talk about this with all my mom friends. Your breast pump starts to talk to you
Mm-hmm.
right? You start hearing words in your breast pump. But I think that just that whole experience of being in the hospital, feeling like my body was on display, was just this like commodity really, and it wasn't like I wasn't producing much milk. So instantly they wanted to start supplementing with formula in the hospital.
Mm.
And again, I mean, there were a lot of things now that I'm thinking back to it, like I want to say she spiked a fever. So like she had an IV, like there were just like a lot of things that felt unnatural about the process that I was like, wait, all this stuff is happening and it doesn't feel the easy peasy like I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
So instantly I started to develop a lot of anxiety around breastfeeding.
Of course you would. Of
Yeah.
course you would.
Yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to pause and say that is a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot for a person to deal with, and what you picture is going to be this most amazing moment of your life.
Yeah.
So I just want to honor that for a moment. That,
Yeah.
of course, you would have feelings, negative feelings associated with what you just described.
Right.
And then I want to go back. There's something that you said that I want to ask about, which was you mentioned feeling that your body wasn't yours.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things that I heard that would make me feel like my body wasn't mine was you said the nurse put your breast in the baby's mouth, tried to.
Yeah.
Well, of course. Like what? Somebody else is touching your breast.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that's just again because at a hospital in labor and delivery, you're just another cow, right? Like cattle keeps going through.
Right.
But I think that that's what it was. It was just everything just felt so mechanical and so disconnected. I guess that's the best terminology I can use for it. Like everything felt very disconnected to what that bonding moment was supposed to be. I mean, don't get me wrong, we definitely had those like I'm so grateful that we did the skin to skin thing and that it was all part of the process, but I think I don't know if it just so happened to be the fact that it was an emergency C-section, like that it wasn't actually all planned out. I don't know. It was yeah, like I said, this hasn't been something that I've actually talked about very much, but I think that it was a very outer body kind of disconnected experience at
Yeah,
that time, in that moment at least.
of course. Yeah, I think often even well-meaning hospital staff, for them, it's another shift,
Yeah.
another mom,
Yep.
another baby, and they've seen a million breasts.
Right.
They've helped a million people breastfeed. And sometimes they themselves get disconnected from the experience and they forget what is needed to create a sacred space,
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
which can have long lasting impacts on how somebody feels about that experience.
Yeah.
And of course, you would feel like just another cow.
Right.
Sometimes when the pressure is on from hospital staff to like, come on, where's the milk? Baby's hungry. Oh, it's only 10 milliliters, and then we start to feel like, oh, it's only 10 milliliters. What's wrong?
Yeah,
with
that
you?
was
What's wrong with
definitely
your body?
exactly. That was definitely the narrative of like, oh, this is a little low. Like, what do you want me to do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you're in a relaxed environment where people are telling you your baby's tummy is the size of a cherry, she doesn't need much, every little drop you get is helping, that's a different narrative, right?
It is. Oh, absolutely.
You're doing your best. She's going to be fine. You're doing great. Then that can create a calming atmosphere that helps the person feel like, okay, I can do this. I've got this. I have a beautiful baby. I'm a great mom. My body was designed to do this. My body
Right.
can do this. But many times in the hospital, that's not the narrative we receive.
It's not. And I think, unfortunately, it's not the narrative that continues through to new moms, too, because I can recall going to her first pediatrician appointment, which is what, at like week 1 or however it is, and them noticing that she was a little bit underweight and instantly, okay, well, here's an appointment with our lactation consultant, and again, okay, I'm doing something wrong. If I can't get this, and if she's underweight, and if I'm not making milk, and now I have to go see a specialist, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah. I'm so sorry you experienced.
It's okay. I mean, I think that people need to hear these stories too, because it's not always so easy. And just know that you will end up with a beautiful, happy, healthy baby on the other side, regardless. But it's a struggle. And just know that it's like, you're not alone in this struggle.
Do you love to read about pregnancy, childbirth, and breastfeeding? Are you looking for books to help you become a more confident parent? Or perhaps books to help you understand what went wrong with your breastfeeding journey or to do better next time with breastfeeding? Or do your kids have questions about breastfeeding or pregnancy, but you don't really know how to answer them? Would you prefer to have a curated list on these topics? Go to the link in the show notes to my new affiliated bookshop. Every purchase you make benefits the Milk Making Minutes. But better than that, these books are vetted. I've read them all, and I feel very confident recommending them to you. I'll be adding to them continuously, so go to that link when you want to purchase a book. It will help the show, and you can feel confident it will be a purchase you will enjoy.
Aside from just giving birth, there was this whole other stressor that was lurking in the room with us, where when I was 8 months pregnant, we got an eviction notice for our apartment because they were redoing the entire building and everyone was getting evicted. Or you could stay in the construction zone and still pay the elevated rate, right, without your apartment being redone. So we had already made the commitment or the plan that whenever we were ready to move out of the current apartment is when we would buy a house. So we planned on staying there for, at least a year, maybe 9 months or so after Kennedy was born. But now that timeline got squashed right away. So, I mean, I was in labor and my husband is looking at house listings on Redfin trying to figure out, okay, where are we going to live?
Whoa.
So we did a crazy kind of turnaround. He was signing signing documents while I was in recovery. She was born December 3rd. We closed on our house December 18th. We did a complete renovation and moved in on January 2nd.
Wow.
So that whole combination, I 100% attest to me losing milk, having such anxiety around breastfeeding, because we can get to this later in the story, but I was home with Kennedy for her first 2 weeks of life where I was packing our apartment to move.
Right.
And there was a moment where luckily my parents came back out during this time and I was sitting in my rocking chair in my bedroom, deer in headlights, just completely paralyzed and holding Kennedy and like, I can't do anything else but take care of this child that I'm holding. And everything else just felt so paralyzing.
Yeah, anybody would be stressed out. And sometimes people come to me and they need permission. Not that they really need permission, but sometimes they need permission to just say, are you looking for permission to end breastfeeding?
I see, friends who are just getting so stressed out around their breastfeeding journey where I had about 3 or 4 friends who we all kind of had babies around the same time, but I was the first of us. And so many of them I know, and to be completely frank, I think like I had a little bit of animosity towards the friends that it was easy for. And when they had a complication or anything like that, I kind of blew it off like, yeah, I didn't even bother with that at that point. It was, I think, a little bit of a defense mechanism where I didn't have to feel bad or feel guilty about it if I made it seem like I think I pumped for, I want to say 2.5 months.
Okay.
Ish. But that was still supplementing with formula because there still wasn't enough. But I remember there being moments where I would just kind of make it seem like, ugh, breastfeeding, like, oh, formula's so much easier. But that was my defense mechanism, right? To not feel guilty about it.
And I always tell people really what we're dealing with is systemic failure of really supporting moms correctly.
Yes.
You know, like not putting boobs in babies' mouths. That's not the support I'm talking about. But a systemic failure of true support from the hospital to what pediatricians say and do for support to just being a mom and a baby in homes with very little community support,
Yeah.
to feeling uncomfortable breastfeeding in public when we're mammals, you know, like to not having enough time. Like by the time your milk supply gets established within the first 12 weeks, and then you have to go back to work.
Right.
If you're lucky.
Right.
You know, if you're lucky, you get 12 weeks off. So there's a lot of systemic problems we have that make breastfeeding really, really, really hard. And so I always tell people, if breastfeeding is really difficult for you, it's not your body failing. It's not you failing. It's a systemic failure.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't think that there are enough resources either way that you go, because I think once I did make that decision of, listen, I'm done with pumping. I am sitting here getting minimal out of me. I feel, and that was the other thing. Again, now renovating a house, I had electricians coming in and plumbers coming in, and I'm like hiding in my bedroom trying to pump with this, 1 month old. And just the environment around me was not conducive for a good experience around even just pumping, right? So I think when I kind of made that decision, I wish that there were more resources around there that were more supportive of, you see the hashtag fed is best, all the social media messaging that's out there. But I think that it would have been more helpful if there were a little bit more like professional support around that, because I feel like you do get tons of professional support from your pediatricians pushing you towards the lactation consultants and, all these different specialists in that side of things. But there really isn't anyone kind of supporting your mental health of whatever choice you make.
Yeah. That's really, really hard. Good lactation consultants can do that, but it's hard to know. Like if you think, oh, I'm going to be judged for making this choice, and some do. So it's hard to know, who you can call and walk away feeling really good.
Right.
Because there is a lot that goes into weaning off of pumping. You don't want to get plugged ducts. You don't want to end up with mastitis. And then you're dealing with the grief of your lost experience.
Yep.
Especially if you thought this is going to come easily for me. This is going to be really natural.
Yeah.
Did you ever have any moments while you were breastfeeding your daughter that you felt this feels good? I'm enjoying this. I'm getting those feel good hormones. I'm looking in my daughter's eyes. This is what it was supposed to feel like for me.
If I'm going to be completely honest, it was the opposite. Every time she was latching, I continued to have this anxiety and feeling a lack of connection, if anything, because I'm like, why? I could tell she wasn't latching properly. Okay, if she's not latching properly, I'm not holding her in the reverse football, whatever all those different positions that the consultants and that the baby books and the YouTube videos say to do. So I think that there just kept being that disconnecting feeling when I was trying to have her latch and nurse. That was then the neural pathway that got built in my head, right? Was that it was going to be this anxious moment for me. So it was much easier for me to pull away and set myself in the, okay, let's just pump as long as we can and get her fed mentality, because like it still makes me cringe a little bit, that anxious feeling that I would have every time I would try to nurse her.
Yeah. And were you able to tell this to anyone?
Unfortunately, no. I really didn't have a connection with someone that I felt like I could express that to. I didn't have friends around again with babies and having the same kind of experience. And the ones that did have babies were ones that nursed their baby till they were two, you know? So it was like no one was in that same experience in that same moment that I was. So it felt very disconnected. And even my own mom, like she nursed me with no complications. So I didn't feel like I could connect with her and even bring that to her. And my
Yeah.
husband is Mr. Black and White and everything's so logical to him. So it was very difficult for me to express that kind of feeling and emotion. And he's like, four brothers. He's like, I don't understand with girl parts, whatever. So yeah, it was very isolating and quite miserable to be in that alone.
Yeah. Yeah. So you ended up pumping for 2.5 months. Did you continue to try to latch, or did you at some point decide that's too miserable? I'm just going to pump to try to get breast milk?
Can vividly remember there would be a couple times where I would just be like on the bed cuddling with Kennedy and she would start nuzzling over and I would be like, okay, let's just try. And I would put my breast near her and she would latch. And it was so short lived, but I let those moments happen when I saw her interest and saw her try to do it. But she was not one of those babies that, you know, could smell it a mile away. Or I think that she was completely fine with being bottle fed and she was very easy actually with once we found the right bottle that she liked. It's what she was used to and everything felt really good and really convenient from there.
Okay. Okay. So every now and then she might. And then at what point did you decide I am done with the pump? Do you remember that moment?
I do. I think I was on the pump for like a good 15 minutes and barely the bottom rim of the bottles were getting filled. And
Mhm.
at that point, it's like, okay, this is the physical representation of I'm drained. I'm completely
Mhm.
drained. I have nothing more to give here. The well has run dry, whatever other analogy you want to put in there, because it was just so exhausting to sit there and hear my pump yell at me and I can't it's funny for a long time I remembered the word that it used to say to me but now I can't remember anymore
Oh,
but
I'm going to ask.
yeah there was definitely a word and it was something like I want to say it was over under I think it was like over under over
Oh
under
my
something like that.
gosh.
So yes, it was like over under is what all I could hear my pump telling me. And that's when I was like, I'm done. I'm done. We're sticking with formula.
Okay. And at that point, were you mostly giving formula and you were supplementing with breast milk?
Yeah, it was at that point, I think I can't remember what our pediatrician, what like the ratio was or whatever. I think it was we were mixing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
at that point.
And what do you think was driving you to continue the pumping despite being so miserable?
I think it's because I felt it was what I was supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
I felt a lot of societal pressure that, you know, the moms who start off with their goal of they're going to breastfeed till 2 or they're going to breastfeed for the first year or they're going to breastfeed for the first 6 months and like that timeline narrowed very quickly for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, let's try to get to 3 months, which again, looking back at it, I shouldn't have set a timeline at all. I
Mm-hmm.
think that that was an additional stressor that I didn't need to put on myself. And I don't think that people should have those timelines and those milestones necessarily set out because then it adds a whole nother level of pressure as a new mom that we don't need.
Did you only feel disconnected from her during feeding times?
Yeah, yeah. And
At other times you felt connected?
totally. Yes. I think that like we had a very good bond just in like skin to skin and just being around each other and like, you know, during those regular interactions. And my child, she came out with the personality she has as a 5-year-old. So
Uh-huh.
she was super receptive and very interactive from the get go. So I always felt that we had a good connection and I could understand her very easily and quickly. It really was around feeding that started to make me very anxious.
There is a term called nursing aversion that is used to describe negative feelings associated with breastfeeding that some breastfeeding women experience. It is not widely studied, so not much is known about it, but it could be that Kasey's anxious feelings could be attributed to a nursing aversion. For most people who report these negative feelings, it only occurs while the baby or toddler is latched, and the feelings go away as soon as the baby is not latched anymore. Now that I had heard that Kasey had made the decision to stop pumping, I wanted to know if she received any guidance about how to proceed. This was her response.
So I don't think that it was too difficult to wean, only because I was producing such little milk at the time anyway. I kind of noticed, just like drips here and there for the next couple weeks, whether when in the shower, or I would be like, oh, there's a spot in my bra, cool. But luckily, I didn't experience anything too difficult. I do remember, it's funny, I have this vivid memory of this is like one of those moments where I was like, this is just not conducive to what's going on in our lives right now. But we had just finished bringing, I think, appliances or something like that into our new house. And we were with friends my friend was pregnant at the time. Kennedy was only 2-3 weeks old. And I knew I needed to pump. And I just felt like my boobs were about to explode. They just hurt so badly. It was like we were trying to get food because we hadn't eaten. And I was just so uncomfortable. And I just remember feeling this like, I don't know how, she's not going to latch. I can't nurse her. I don't have access to a pump right now. Like, I don't know how I'm going to ride this out. So, I mean, I kind of just suffered through pain until we were back at our other apartment and I could pump. But at that point, it was so uncomfortable and so painful that's when I was like, yeah, I don't know how many more days like this I can have where my days are too unpredictable.
Yeah. Did anyone ever do a phalange sizing for you?
Yes, I think we did do when I went to the lactation consultant after that first pediatrician appointment. I do think that there was we did some sort of sizing. I want to say, if anything, I probably had ones that were too big because I can remember looking down and being like, oh my God, my entire boob is getting sucked through this tunnel.
Exactly. Most people have ones that are way too big.
Yeah, then that's very much likely the case. And I think that was another part of that disconnection and that feeling of disgust around my body where I'm looking at this and it's, supposed to be something that's so beautiful and natural when you're breastfeeding, and then you're stuck in this suction cup. And it's just so diminishing. I do feel like there are a lot better options out there now, even ones that came out 6 months after I was done or after I had Kennedy, because there's ones I looked at them afterwards and I'm like, I wish this looked way more conducive to something I could manage. The actual wireless ones, my goodness, how easy would that have been to stick inside my bra and go answer the door for an electrician or something, I think that I was just at that cusp of the pumps being a little bit more conducive to modern day living.
Yeah, there's this author named Kimberly Seals Aller. She wrote this book called The Big Letdown, and it's all about all the forces that have made breastfeeding so hard in the modern world. And one of the things she brings up is we can get a person to the moon, and breast pumping today is still as horrible as it was 20 years ago,
right?
30 years ago,
Yes, I don't understand.
Right. It's because it hasn't been made a priority. So you talked a little bit about just feeling a disconnection with your body, a little bit of body dysmorphia. Was there anything else going on during that postpartum time with dysmorphia or feeling like that you weren't connected to your body with the C-section healing or anything like that? Or did it mostly have to do with breastfeeding and pumping?
I mean, let's be honest, and just my own personal experience and backstory, I feel like I have been on a diet my entire life. I talk about this actually a lot on my own podcast, where I am just now at the cusp of 35 doing my work to ditch diet culture, because it has been such a ingrained message in my brain, and my neural pathways always veer towards some sort of diet culture and body image issue. I think that there's such a correlation to the Y2K era and to millennials, that we were just fed such a mess of body image messaging that messed with our brains so much, right? I mean, I can vividly remember the magazine covers of the early 2000s, where it was either Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie being so skinny, or poor like Jessica Simpson and Jennifer Love Hewitt being called fat because they had cellulite and a size 6.
Right.
So I think I just have grown up with this feeling of my body was never right. My body was never what looked like it fit the mold ever. I've always had thick thighs. I've always had big arms. I'm Portuguese. I have hips, like it's the way my Mediterranean body was made, which is something I'm finally learning and accepting and understanding. But I think that it was looking in the mirror, seeing all this weight that I had gained. And here's a story that I'm going to share, because I think that it helps give some perspective around someone with body issues going into pregnancy. Is that I can vividly remember a moment in the hospital where the nurse was asking me for my weight, and my husband was on the couch next to me, and I lied to her about my weight because I didn't want him to hear what the actual number was. And then later, when he was asleep, she came back in. I was like, just so you know, I weighed this instead. And she's like, why did you lie to me? This is for your anesthesia. Like, this could actually mess you up. And at that moment, I was like, I am so concerned about a number on a scale while I am 9.5 months pregnant, that
Yeah.
I felt the need to instantly lie about my weight to a medical professional, because I was so embarrassed for my husband to hear what that number might be. And
Right.
that was such a sobering moment for me, where I realized, like, I'm so insecure about my body and about the number on a scale. And when I looked at my body postpartum, and everything is just all over the place, and organs haven't shifted back to where they're supposed to be,
Oh,
and talk about not recognizing your body in the mirror, right? And then I have these boobs that are hanging off of me that are much bigger than they were before, but now they look like flat pancakes because the meat's getting sucked out of them by this pump. It was just so, again, like just a major disconnection and a major feeling of disgust, really.
yeah. Yeah.
So I had a very big struggle around my body, not only postpartum, but I think I had a struggle around my body postpartum because of my pre-existing body issues.
Yes, absolutely. I remember when I was pregnant having a feeling of relief. I'm trying to ditch diet culture myself too. It's a long, hard road.
It is. It
But
is.
especially when you have kids and you're trying to model that with your kids, just like
Uh-huh.
not even, just eating for enjoyment and eating because you like food, and not even mentioning anything that has to do with eating in any way to reduce your size or to change your body.
Yep.
It's so hard to ditch
It is.
it.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
And do you have girls?
I have one girl and one boy.
Okay, so I have noticed myself trying to rewrite that narrative around the way that I talk about food in front of Kennedy, because I realized the messaging that I was given as a child completely. My mom, I really don't think did anything intentionally, but it was the way her
No.
brain was working too.
Exactly.
I mean, a lot of people ask if we're planning on a number 2, and I would be lying if I said that that wasn't in the back of my head as well, of like, oh, I don't want to gain all that weight again.
I know it's hard.
It's
and it's a
hard to shake
horrible
that.
thing to be thinking about when you're talking about bringing life into the world.
Yep.
Now, it's nobody's business whether or not you have one or a two, whether or not you
Right.
have.
I know.
But, to have that be the thing that prevents a person from growing their family is horrible.
I think that it's also a responsibility, I think, that we kind of have as women to each other to ditch this expectation of bouncing back and getting back to your pre-baby weight. But, we are so quick to assume that it's a misogynistic thing, right? That it's like men putting this pressure on women. And unfortunately, it's women who put this pressure on women because we are the ones we can control what we consume as far as content goes, right? So why are we subjecting ourselves to content or to people who quote unquote influence us that make us feel bad about ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Find the ones who make you feel good about yourself, man. But again, whole other topic for a whole other show. And I could go on and on. Tune into my show for more of that.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, Kasey, I so appreciate you coming on the Milk Making Minutes to share your story of breastfeeding and feeling disconnected during both breastfeeding and pumping. And so I know that many people are going to listen and say, wow, I felt that, even if they never voiced it. Like you said, I haven't really talked about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just so appreciate you coming on. And we'll definitely link your show in the show notes. Is there anything else any other place people can find you?
Yeah, you can find me Kasey's Corner wherever you stream podcasts, or daily content is over on Instagram, and my handle is at It's Kasey Potts.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Stories like Kasey's are not uncommon. In a world where landlords can evict their tenants when they are 38 weeks pregnant, and hospital staff think the best practice is to place a person's breast inside of a baby's mouth, many new moms are filled with stress and anxiety at what they thought would be their happiest moments. And in a culture that tells women our bodies are failing us, those of us who struggle with breastfeeding often add it to the long list of body failures. We can't be thin enough or have enough muscles or get that gap between our thighs, and we can't make the milk our baby needed to live. The Milk Making Minutes exists to spread the word that your body did not fail you. You were not supported. You were stressed. You had needs that weren't being met. Your body isn't failing you. You are enough for your children. If you would like to hear Kasey and I discuss how breastfeeding and body image are intertwined in more detail, check out the episode I recorded for Kasey's Corner that came out on August 25th. I'll link it in the show notes. If you want to talk more about the systemic failures that lead to breastfeeding struggles, join the Milk Making Minutes community group on Facebook. It's growing each week. We need your voice there so we can make changes for the people coming behind us.